Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to be discussing the life of Sheila Bellush Part 2. And if you haven't already, I suggest you go back to watch Part 1, otherwise you may be a bit confused. Let's jump back in where we left off. So Sheila and Allen had recently gotten married and were living together with Sheila's parents. They trusted Allen so much that they decided to invest in his stereo business and opened a line of credit for him at their bank. Life was starting to take off for the Van Hoots. The company had taken off, and they were able to move into a fancy high-rise apartment in Portland. 5 months into their marriage, Sheila discovered that she was pregnant and was utterly thrilled. But it wouldn't be long before Allen's old habits started creeping back in. Sheila gave birth to their baby daughter in April of 1984, and they decided to name her Stevie Nicks Van Hoot at Allen's insistence. He told Sheila that he wanted to call her that because music played such a prominent role in their life, but he had an ulterior motive. He wanted his daughter to have a traditionally male name so that he could use her social security number and assume her identity without raising any suspicion. Jean and Don started to suspect that Allen wasn't being truthful with them about the business and that he may be hiding money. A few months after Stevie was born, a customer filed a lawsuit against the store, claiming that they had sold them faulty equipment. Allen reassured the Smiths that the suit was bogus and that everything was under control, but that wasn't quite the case. When they went to the storage warehouse, they discovered that it was just a single storage unit filled with broken TVs. They were freaking the f*** out, but that wasn't even the worst of it. He took their boats and all of their vehicles without saying a single word. Don only discovered this after receiving a notification that his driver's license had been suspended due to unpaid traffic fines. He knew that something wasn't right and contacted the state to discover that this had been done. When Jean and Don confronted Allen about doing this, he literally asked them, "What are you going to do about it?" before selling Don's van right in front of him. They discovered that Allen had also duplicated Don's driver's license and had begun converting all of the Smiths' assets into his own name. Allen also wasn't paying any of the bills associated with the business that Don and Jean were so invested in. This ended up destroying their credit and forced them to file for bankruptcy. Everything that they had worked so hard for was gone entirely. They had lost their entire life savings, and Allen stripped them of their retirement. It was a complete mess, but things were only about to get worse. They were obviously furious about Allen and confronted Sheila about her husband's behavior, but eventually decided to back off when she became incredibly ill. She wound up in the hospital with spinal meningitis, an infection of the fluid and membranes around the spinal cord. It can spread through the body rapidly, cause brain damage in a matter of hours, and even be fatal. Some of the symptoms include high fever, stiff neck, severe headaches, nausea, vomiting, confusion, seizures, difficulty walking, no appetite, sensitivity to light, and so on. Needless to say, while Sheila was dealing with this illness, she needed to help with Stevie, who was only 5 months old at the time. Allen refused to help care for her. While his wife was essentially on her deathbed in the hospital, he was out golfing. Not only did he refuse to visit Sheila in the hospital, but he also forbade Don and Jean from visiting her as well. He only allowed Carrie to come around, but only she could care for the baby Stevie, so he didn't have to. Sheila and Allen had only been married for a year, but he had already managed to wreck his relationship with his in-laws and alienate his wife from everyone she loved. And he was already planning his exit strategy from the life and problems that he had created. He wanted to get away from the Smiths and get him off his back, so he convinced Sheila to move away with him. He told her that the loss of his stereo business was her parents' fault. He claimed that they mismanaged their money and refused to take responsibility for his actions. She was forced to make a decision and choose between her family or her husband. Naturally, it wasn't an easy decision for her to make. Though she was starting to see through Allen's facade and recognizing that maybe he wasn't the man she thought he was, she still wanted to keep her little family together. She agreed to move with him, hoping that a new start would be good for them. They moved to Hawaii in October of 1985. Allen screwed over the Smiths one last time by taking all of the expensive inventory they had left and shipping it to Hawaii. He cleaned them out. Once Allen and Sheila arrived in Hawaii, they settled in Honolulu, and things seemed to be better. Hawaii is expensive, and they were barely able to make ends meet. Sheila got a job as an assistant at another law firm, while Allen was on his next big project. He was convinced that he would one day be a millionaire. He promised Sheila that they would live lavishly and that he would give her and Stevie everything they ever wanted. It didn't take long before the excitement of living in a new, beautiful state wore off. Between Sheila's assistant job and Allen selling off his Capital Hi-Fi shares, they were hanging on only by a thread. As Allen grew more desperate, he decided to head off to Taiwan in search of his next great idea. He was searching for another product that he could build a new business around. And to Sheila's surprise, he did find something. While overseas, he came across a device that stimulated muscles with an electric pulse. It would allow people to build their muscles without doing any physical exercise. Allen became fixated on this product. He was convinced that it was perfect from a business standpoint because he could sell it to doctors, patients, or average consumers. He believed that it would be of interest to athletes or lazy people who didn't feel like putting in the effort to tone their bodies, but still wanted to be looking good. From what I understand, the product had potential at the time, but needed additional work done to the electronics to work the way it should. Allen knew that he could handle the sales aspect, but suspected that he might need some help with the technology to complete the project. He enlisted the help of his father, Guy, and brother Randy, who worked with electronics. He convinced them to move to Hawaii and go into business with them, somehow securing a $160,000 loan from the Bank of Hawaii. The loan allowed him to purchase over 3,000 of the devices and have them shipped back to Hawaii. When he returned home, he formed a Pacific International Electronics Supply Company and named the device the Healthtronic. He truly believed that this was everything he needed to become successful. Because they'd be working on this device together, Guy, his new wife Chris, her 2 children, and Randy all moved in with Allen and Sheila. Sheila was happy to have Chris, who was only 26, because it felt like she had a new friend rather than a mother-in-law. She enjoyed the company, but cramming 8 people into a 4-bedroom house was pretty overwhelming. It became even more overwhelming once Sheila discovered that she was pregnant with her second child. While she was happy to be having another baby, she wasn't thrilled about the way her marriage was progressing. Allen had started acting aggressively toward her, and he wasn't happy about her pregnancy. The entire family would witness him abusing her on numerous occasions, yet would do nothing to help her. One day, while she was only a few months pregnant, Allen became angry and picked Sheila up by her shirt collar. He was holding her up against the wall, with her feet dangling until he was finished lecturing her. At other points, he would question the baby's paternity and claim that he wasn't the father. Sheila was hurt, but felt that he would come around if she held on a little longer. She thought he'd be happy once the business took off, but she was sadly mistaken. Carrie came to visit and was immediately shocked by Sheila's appearance. Despite being 4 months pregnant at the time, she appeared to be emaciated, weighing only 85 pounds. Though she was only 23, she looked as if she was in her 40s. Her face was sunken, and she had bruises across most of her body. Carrie promised Allen that if he continued to hurt her sister, she would kill him. She tried to convince Sheila to come home with her, but she was too afraid. She gave birth to her second daughter, Daryl Hannah Van Hoot, in July of 1985. Again, Allen insisted on using a male name so that he could assume her identity if he needed to. Sheila didn't know that until it was much too late. Her hopes of Allen being a nicer man once the business took off were about to disappear. The FDA, U.S. Marshals, and customs officials seized Allen's entire warehouse, which was filled with over 2,700 Healthtronics. They then arrested Allen for fraud. This was because he claimed that the devices could tone your body without any exercise, which wasn't exactly factual. Rather than face the heat, Allen bonded out of jail, packed his family up, and fled the state as soon as possible. He left his dad and brother behind to deal with the consequences, and because they rode it out, Allen eventually got the karma that he deserved. The Van Hoots moved to a condo in Helotes, Texas, which wasn't far from San Antonio. Not long after Allen fled, Guy formed another business called Westpac Electronics and rebranded Healthtronic as a medical device. He believed that he could make them do what they had previously claimed with his knowledge of electronics. He was successful and was able to receive approval from the FDA later. Allen had bailed out too soon, and he was furious that his father was profiting off his idea while he received nothing. He then decided that Guy was his nemesis and wanted to disassociate with him as soon as possible. He changed their last name from Van Hoot, which was Guy's last name, to Blackthorne. Apparently, Allen felt that a new last name would give him a new identity, which was just what he needed. He likely wanted to change their last name because he didn't want any future business associates to find out about his previous scandals. From that point forward, Allen only spoke to Guy if it was business related. Once they were settled in San Antonio, Sheila got another job working at the law firm of Soles and Wallace. She hoped that a new city meant a new beginning for their family, but it didn't quite work out that way. It didn't take long for Allen to form yet another business centered around Healthtronic. He developed a company called EMS, which sold the EMS 250. This time, it was approved to be sold as a health device, and Allen's company started to do really well. He had worked out a deal with Guy where he would purchase the devices for $125 a piece and resell them as the EMS 250 for $1,700. He would sell them in bulk at some points, selling more than 500 at a time for a discount. Even with the deal, he was still bringing in close to $200,000 at a time. The business was so large that he was able to lure highly educated men to come and work for him at EMS. They believed that Allen received his education from Stanford, despite not having any college education at all. Though the Van Hoot Blackthornes had found some success, their marriage was in shambles. During Christmas of 1985, Allen and Sheila took the kids to visit Carrie and her new husband Rick. Carrie was pregnant and had never met baby Daryl yet, so she was thrilled to see her sister and nieces. She was sad to see that Sheila was even more unhappy than she had been in Hawaii. She looked worse than before and was only about 80 pounds at the time. While they were visiting, Allen made numerous jokes that were degrading towards Sheila. He tried to make it seem as if she were a gold digger and a complete bimbo, neither of which was true. Carrie responded and said, "Allen, you better be nicer to my sister or she might just leave you." They were all shocked when he answered and said, "If she leaves me, I will kill her and take the girls." By that point, Sheila desperately wanted to escape Allen's abuse, but was afraid to leave him due to these remarks. She stayed with him for another 2 years, but things would only get worse. Financially, they were doing great. They moved into a large, beautiful home in the Castle Hill suburbs of San Antonio. Allen had his own bedroom and would often bring various men and women into their home to have sex with him while his wife and kids were in the next room. At one point, he invited one of his co-workers to leave with him without even speaking to Sheila. He later asked a male sex worker to move in, and again did so without addressing it to Sheila. He would have sex with these people loudly, with the door open, so that she was forced to hear what was going on. And if she spoke up about it, he would physically assault her. She confided in a friend that he had tried to drown her in the toilet by forcing her head in the toilet and flushing it repeatedly. One day, Sheila had finally had enough. Allen came home raging and accusing her of many things that weren't true. He claimed he knew she was having an affair and that she was only with him for his money, despite her paying the bills herself for long periods of time. Being that she weighed less than 100 pounds, she wasn't able to get away from him. Allen removed his belt and beat her with it repeatedly. He told her that he would mess up her face so that no man would want her and that he'd make sure she would never walk again. He then beat her face with his fist. After the beating was over, Sheila called the police. He had done things like this one too many times, and she knew she couldn't go through it again. Allen was ultimately arrested and charged with misdemeanor battery. He spent a few days in jail, but was released on his own recognizance. He received a 30-day jail sentence, which was suspended, and was placed on probation. In addition, he only owed a $93 fine for court costs, which he never paid. While Allen was in jail, Sheila was given a family violence card from the district attorney's office. She called the number, packed up Stevie and Daryl, and left. They slept in a church basement for a few days while she tried to figure out what to do. She believed that Allen would kill her for calling the police on him, and she was terrified. She called his Aunt Debbie and told her that she had to leave him before she packed up and fled to Oregon. When Sheila and the girls flew in, her parents were shocked by her appearance. She had gotten even thinner and looked even older than she had in Hawaii. She wasn't the feisty, witty Sheila that she once knew. It was almost like her body was there, but her personality had diminished entirely. She stayed in Oregon for a few weeks and seemed to have regained her strength. She gained a few pounds, the bruises were fading, and she started to feel like herself again. She wanted the divorce she had wished for years, and she wanted to make sure that she got custody of her girls. Sheila made up her mind that nothing was going to hold her back anymore. She and the girls headed back to San Antonio and found a small 2-bedroom apartment that she'd been able to afford on her own. She didn't have enough money for the attorney, but thankfully, she knew enough about the law to represent herself. She filed for divorce with a 100-page deposition on October 15, 1987. Sheila described to the courts just how vicious Allen had been to her. She told them about all of his threats to kill her if she left him and all of his physical abuse. The divorce took 11 months, but was finally granted in September of 1988. Sheila was awarded primary custody of Stevie and Daryl, $1,250 a month in child support, and he was to maintain health insurance on his daughters. She was also awarded 22% of EMS because it had been established during their marriage. That 22% was worth $275,000. Allen was awarded the house, but was pissed about the ruling. He promptly filed for bankruptcy because by that point, he had already run EMS into the ground. It was likely that Sheila would never see a single dollar from the business. Even though it appeared that Allen had no money left, he was great at hiding assets and would avoid paying Sheila her share at all costs. Truthfully, she knew that she wouldn't ever see that money. She was just happy to be divorced from him, and she was awarded primary custody of the girls. She knew she'd figure out her financial situation by herself. She would survive. But little did she know, it wasn't really the end. He was only getting started on his revenge. Allen rarely spent time with the girls during his visitation and would constantly harass Sheila about the child support anytime that he could. She and the kids lived in a small 800 square foot apartment, driving a shitty beat-up car. Though Allen claimed he only made $4,500 total in 1989, he was living in a mansion and driving a brand new Cadillac convertible. He enjoyed seeing his ex-wife struggling. He wanted her to be miserable and felt he shouldn't have to pay her child support. She had chosen to leave him, and that wasn't his problem as far as he was concerned. Despite these struggles, Sheila was happy for the first time in a long time. She began casually dating and had hopes that she would fall in love again. She believed that the right person was out there waiting for her. This time, though, she promised that she would always put herself and her kids first. She knew she had to be more thoughtful about who she chose as her life partner. She vowed that she would never lose herself again. Co-parenting wasn't easy, but it became even more complicated when Sheila noticed signs that Stevie had been sexually abused. She was only 3 at the time and had said things to another child that were sexual in nature and what Sheila described as disturbing. She was heartbroken and terrified to send her daughters back with their father, but she was conflicted. She didn't have solid proof that it happened, so she couldn't file anything, but she also was afraid to defy their court order. So she did whatever she could to prevent visitation from happening. She made it as difficult as possible and used stall tactics when Allen wanted to pick up the girls. It was nearly impossible to successfully prevent it every time, though. She immediately put Stevie in therapy, and the psychologist also believed Stevie showed signs of being sexually abused. Sheila took this information to the police and petitioned the court to get full custody. Allen was initially arrested with aggravated sexual assault in September of 1988. Unfortunately, the system failed Stevie, and the charges were dropped. Once again, Allen would not be held responsible for his actions, and he was still able to visit with his children unsupervised. Sheila lived in constant fear about what was happening to her children while they were in their father's care. They would come home from his house and tell her that he promised them that he would take them far, far away, that they would go on an airplane and they wouldn't see their mom again. If Sheila kept Allen informed about the girls falling and injuring themselves, he would rush over to her apartment and tell her how unfit she was. He'd make claims that she was abusing them and threatened to kill her if she ever harmed his children. He did anything he could to intimidate her and create chaos in her life. The following year, Allen filed a petition to modify their child support agreement. He asked for a reduction from $1,250 a month to $350 per month for both kids. Additionally, he no longer wanted to be financially responsible for their health insurance. The suit required him to serve Sheila with the court papers. He claimed that he did so, but she never actually received them. Therefore, she was unable to show up for the court hearing. He won the suit by default, and the reduction caused Sheila significant financial issues. He was aware of that and used it to his advantage. He had her right where he wanted her. After the child support reduction, he approached her and acted as if he had a change of heart about helping her. He claimed that he didn't like that his daughters lived in a tiny apartment in a less prominent neighborhood, so he offered to buy a house for her and the kids. She was hesitant to accept the offer. She knew that there would be stipulations that she likely wouldn't agree to. He said that he found the perfect house in his neighborhood, only 4 houses down from his. She was hesitant, but ultimately decided to accept the offer because she thought it was best for Stevie and Daryl. The house had a large yard and more space, and she felt that they deserved more than what she could financially afford to give them. She decided to have a girlfriend move in with her for her own security, but despite that, it didn't take long before Allen once again became overbearing. Sheila instantly began to regret that decision. He used the close proximity to manipulate the girls and alienate them from their mother, especially Stevie, who was his favorite at the time. Stevie was 9 at the time and Daryl was 7. He bought them electric cars so that they could ride down to his house whenever they wanted. When they wouldn't get their way with Sheila, they'd ride down to his house to complain. He went out of his way to undermine her, often telling the girls that they didn't have to listen to her. He'd keep them down at his house for so long that Sheila would have to walk down to tell them to come home. He'd refuse to give them back while claiming that she was abusing them. When Sheila would discipline them, they'd say, "I don't have to listen to what you say. My daddy says we'll go to the judge." Aside from the manipulation, Allen would keep track of the times that Sheila came and went. He'd watch her as she'd return from dates, and he always knew when she left her house. She suddenly felt smothered and unsafe in her own home. Even more problems arose when she started to suspect that he was sexually abusing Stevie. Afraid that the move was doing more harm than good, she moved only 6 months later. Thankfully, while living in the house Allen had purchased, she saved her money enough to buy a 2-bedroom home. She packed their shit and they were out. She filed for an increase in child support and sought what she should have been receiving to begin with. Allen was angry over the motion and soon retaliated by filing for full custody of the girls. He represented himself in court, claiming that Sheila was abusing their daughters. He couldn't back those claims, though, and lost the custody battle as well as the child support motion. Allen was required to pay back child support and maintain insurance on the girls once again. Lastly, since he had lied to the court and said that he had adequately served Sheila, Allen was ordered to pay all of the court fees and reimburse Sheila for her attorney fees. Thankfully, the truth finally came out, and for once, Allen was held accountable for his actions. He soon began threatening Sheila once again, claiming that he would get full custody of the girls. When she reminded him that the counselor would testify about the sexual abuse, he dropped the argument. It seemed as if everyone could finally move forward. However, as you may have guessed, their dynamic would never be that simple. Allen eventually lost interest in his children. He started to hyper-focus on his business opportunities when he met 2 businessmen named Rick and Patrick Terrell. They were interested in investing in the EMS 250, and Allen had impressed them so much that they agreed to create their own business that would sell the device. They called it International Rehabilitative Sciences. Allen wasn't required to invest any money into the company, but the men agreed to pay him $5,000 a month plus 10% of their pre-tax profit. He also held 50% of the company's stocks. Rick and Patrick found a way to bill insurance companies for the devices that they were selling, and they earned nearly $9 million in the first year of business. They doubled that number in the second year. So, needless to say, Allen was doing great financially. He poured himself into his work, but still felt that something was missing from his life. He decided that it was time to start dating again. In early 1993, he consulted a dating service in San Antonio called Together and was set up with a woman that the company claimed was the perfect match for him. She brought along a friend on the date who he ended up connecting with much more than his actual date. The two hit it off, and it didn't take long before he began dating the friend, a woman named Maureen. Maureen had a college education and came from a long line of businessmen. Her father was a bigwig at Exxon, and she came from old money. She worked in sales at Kodak and Hewlett-Packard and had a good business sense. She knew precisely what Allen was doing, and he was attracted to that quality. The two bonded over their shared interest, and although Maureen was smitten with Allen's charisma, her family wasn't so sure. They hired a private investigator to look into his background, and they discovered many inconsistencies. Firstly, they discovered that he had not graduated from Stanford, and other lies like it. But because he had changed his name, the private investigator missed his many marriages and business flops. Maureen decided to stay with Allen anyway, despite her family's warnings. She believed that he was telling the truth, and she, like Sheila, wanted to see the best in him. She was willing to overlook the red flags. Allen proposed to Maureen on November 7th, 1993. Coincidentally, this was exactly 4 years before Sheila would be brutally murdered. Meanwhile, Sheila and the kids were just vibing. She longed to find love again and had dated a few men briefly after she divorced Allen, but it was nothing long term. That was until she met a man named Jamie Bellush. In August 1992, she was invited on a blind date with a man who was friends with her sister Carrie. They were supposed to go to a Garth Brooks concert, which she was really excited about. Unfortunately, the man canceled at the last minute, and she was so disappointed that she decided to treat herself. She flew out for a weekend trip to see a friend living in Santa Rosa, California. On the trip back to Texas, she was sitting next to Jamie, and she found him very attractive and vice versa. They chatted throughout the flight, and she learned that he was a retired Marine and was now working in pharmaceutical sales. They were the same age, but he was single with no kids of his own. Once they landed, Jamie offered her a ride home, and she accepted. The two were pretty much inseparable from there. He grew up with 4 brothers and sisters and didn't mind that Sheila had Stevie and Daryl. He had grown up in a stable and healthy environment, and she was attracted to the security that he had to offer. Being an ex-Marine, he had a tough exterior but a soft heart. He loved kids and wanted some of his own one day. Sheila had to explain to him that she could no longer have children due to having a tubal ligation, but he didn't bat an eye. He just wanted her for who she was and all that she had to offer. He asked her to marry him repeatedly, and she eventually agreed. They became a family unit right away. Sheila and Jamie moved in together after dating for a few months and began attending a Baptist church in the near area. They didn't approve of the couple living together without being married and pushed them to get married as soon as possible. They had a small courthouse ceremony in April of 1993 and a large wedding in June of 1993. Both were special in their own way, but Allen did anything he could to swoop in and ruin the big ceremony. The night before the wedding, he was supposed to be returning Stevie and Daryl so that they could attend the rehearsal dinner. She opened the door expecting it to be her kids, but instead, she was served with court papers by a process server. It was a summons to inform her that he was petitioning to change their custody agreement and asking the court for a restraining order. As if that weren't bad enough, when she looked outside, she saw Allen sitting in his car with Stevie and Daryl watching the whole thing transpire. They still went through with the wedding as planned, and she and Jamie didn't let Allen ruin their day. They were forced to postpone their honeymoon due to Sheila having to appear in court when the trip was planned. He was fighting for more time, but she knew that it was just a control tactic because he barely used the time he already had. When he did pick the girls up, they were with his assistant watching TV. He had no genuine interest in his daughters outside of hurting Sheila. Instead, he preferred to be golfing. Allen dropped the lawsuit, and from that point on, he and Sheila only spoke through attorneys. Stevie eventually decided to come forward with the sexual abuse she had endured and refused to spend time with him ever again. If she attempted to contact him for something, he would immediately hand the phone to his assistant. This helped their custody situation in some ways, though. They no longer had things to argue over, and things seemingly calmed down for a while. Sheila still didn't trust Allen, and Allen didn't trust her. Being the kind of person he was, Allen had an issue with Jamie's presence in Stevie and Daryl's life, and things would soon come to a head. But first, each of them grew their new families. Maureen and Allen got married in May of 1994, while she was 5 months pregnant with a little boy. Allen was indifferent to becoming a dad again, and would stay gone all day playing golf at the country club. His new wife soon took on a motherly role toward Allen himself. She had rules for him, and he didn't follow them. She demanded to be in control of their money and pay the bills herself. Surprisingly, this dynamic was precisely what Allen needed. He was afraid to piss her off. The same year that Maureen became pregnant, Sheila and Jamie decided to see what their options were to have a baby together. They wound up doing in vitro fertilization and were shocked when she got pregnant on the first cycle. They were even more shocked and amazed when Sheila became pregnant with not 1 or even 2 babies. She was pregnant with quadruplets. They knew it would be a possibility, but didn't expect it to happen to them. Still, they were thrilled. The pregnancy, however, was difficult. She spent over a month in the hospital before the babies were born and was on bed rest through most of her pregnancy. She also gained 80 pounds, and it was difficult for her to carry around so much weight given that she had always been so petite. She gave birth in December of 1995 to 3 boys and 1 girl. They named them Frankie after their father, Timmy, Joey, and Courtney. Because their birth weights were so low, the baby stayed in the NICU for about a month. By that point, the Bellushes had spent over 2 months of their life walking the halls of that hospital. But they were happy. Stevie and Daryl weren't overjoyed by the birth of their new siblings, though, because Because quadruplets are rare, Sheila, Jamie, and the babies became somewhat local celebrities in San Antonio. Local news stations all wanted interviews with the quad mom, and her two older girls felt pushed aside. At one point, Sheila and the babies were even invited to the Maury show. Though the older girls loved their new siblings, they no longer felt important to their mother, and they weren't handling it well. They used the divide between Allen and Sheila to their advantage, manipulating both parents to get what they wanted. Their father encouraged the terrible behavior, and it only wound up backfiring on Sheila. He was furious that things were going so well for Sheila and by the things that his younger daughter Daryl was telling him. Once again, he became insufferable, refusing to help Sheila or communicate in any way. He stopped paying child support and told Sheila that she needed to change Stevie and Daryl's last names from Blackthorne back to Van Hoot. He had no reason for this other than to make things more difficult for her while she had already had so much responsibility. She agreed though and requested that he pay for half of the cost of changing the name, but Allen refused. Jamie felt that Stevie and Daryl were out of control and felt obligated to step in and help his wife discipline them since it was evident that Allen wouldn't. His punishments were sometimes too harsh, using corporal punishment and beatings when they acted up. As an example, one evening, Jamie walked into Stevie's bedroom and found her asleep with a candle burning beside her. He became so angry that he screamed at her and punched her in the side of her head. Daryl had suffered through similar punishments and had started to favor being at her dad's. She had the most freedom and was now Allen's golden child after Stevie had came forward with the abuse allegations. Daryl often told her mother that she wanted to live with her father, but she wouldn't allow it. In March of 1997, Sheila had reached her boiling point with Daryl. She threatened to beat her after the two got into an argument, and Daryl ran over to the neighbor's house frantic about what had happened. This wasn't the first time that the neighbors were made aware of the abuse going on in the Bellush's home, and they decided to call the sheriff's office and Allen. She had not actually been hit that day, though Sheila admitted that she had spanked both girls with a belt before. The officer advised her that she couldn't hit them with an object ever again, as it's against the law in Texas. During this incident, Allen had rushed over to the Bellush's house to rescue Daryl. While he was there, he met the neighbor who already had a negative opinion about Sheila and Jamie. During the conversation, the neighbor felt that Allen was genuine and kind towards his daughters and agreed to keep her eye out for any other violent outbursts next door. She and her husband actually became friends with the Blackthornes and reported things back to them on almost a daily basis. The girls also trusted the neighbor and would often go over to her house to vent about things that their mother and Jamie had done. She would then call Allen and tell him what was going on. This neighbor kept a journal log with this information and photographed any mark or bruise that the girls had gotten from their beatings. In June of 1997, Allen filed yet another motion against Sheila for contempt of court. Stevie had not been visiting with him, and Sheila wouldn't abide by the court order. Sheila fired back by asking for an increase in child support and a protective order from Allen. They went in front of the judge a month later in July, and he decided to speak with them both privately in chambers. The judge recognized that they held a grudge against each other and recommended counseling for everyone involved, but Sheila wouldn't accept that answer. She told him she had been taking the girls to counseling for years and that she and Jamie were attending themselves, but Allen always refused to follow through. She asked the judge to bring in the therapist so they could testify about Stevie's sexual abuse. They scheduled another meeting, and when they returned, Allen announced to the judge that he would sign over his parental rights to Stevie and Daryl. He cried as he gave them the news, but noted that he was tired of fighting with Sheila and that it wasn't fair to his pregnant wife and young child. The judge was hesitant to grant this request, but ultimately agreed and scheduled a counselor to inform Stevie and Daryl of the news. Allen told Daryl himself and blamed the decision on Sheila. He told her that he was tired of fighting with her mother and just couldn't do it anymore. The girls, especially Daryl, were deeply hurt by this decision and began to act out even more. Allen was supposed to cut off contact with them, but he often spoke to his youngest daughter and sometimes met up with her without Sheila's knowledge. He was hesitant about signing over his rights from the beginning, but felt he was between a rock and a hard place. I get the vibe that Maureen pushed him to give up custody because she was tired of the feuds, and they were worried Allen might be sent to jail over the sexual abuse allegations. It just wasn't worth it to them, so he had to make a choice. Ultimately, he chose the option that saved his own ass, despite believing that his daughters were physically abused. The girls felt completely abandoned by their dad. Daryl wanted to live with him, and now she wasn't even allowed to see him. Not knowing how to process these feelings, they both rebelled. They grew more and more resentful of Jamie's punishments and felt that they were being abused. The neighbor continued to try and be there for the girls and contact Allen, but the Bellushes were fed up with her invasive behavior, so they decided they needed a change. Jamie's company wanted to move him to another district that would cover the Florida region. Sheila wasn't thrilled about leaving San Antonio or the beautiful home they had only recently purchased, but she wanted a fresh start. She believed that it would be best for the kids and was happy to get away from their neighbor, who she felt was nosy and overbearing. Jamie accepted the offer, and the two flew to Florida to scope out the area and find a new house. Sheila flew back to San Antonio by herself, while Jamie stayed behind in Florida to get things in order. It seemed that they were getting a fresh start and a new beginning, but trouble awaited her back in San Antonio. When she arrived home, she discovered that Daryl had contacted Allen while she was gone. They got into another disagreement. She felt betrayed that Daryl would contact him after she told her not to. She beat her with a belt despite receiving a warning previously. Daryl ran over to the neighbor's house, who then called the police. When they arrived, she stated that her mother had hit her with a belt 5 times, called her mean names, and forced her to stare at herself in the mirror while telling her that her face was the face of a liar. Sheila was arrested, and they took Daryl to a juvenile detention center while Stevie stayed home with the quads by herself. Child Protective Services were contacted and determined that the incident wasn't consistent with chronic abuse, so they did not launch an investigation against Sheila. As soon as she was released on bail, they fled to Florida, leaving Daryl behind in the juvenile detention center. They packed as quietly as possible and left in the middle of the night, headed to Sarasota, Florida. Sheila had to immediately return to San Antonio because the state considered the move abandonment and attempted to place Daryl in foster care. The neighbor gave Allen and Maureen all of the evidence that she had compiled, and they hired an attorney. It seemed as if Daryl was no longer being included in the Bellush family, and they wanted to do something about that. The neighbor actually showed up to the custody hearing and offered to adopt Daryl, though her request was denied. Daryl was then released into Sheila's custody, but she requested that the caseworker fly to Florida with them. She didn't want to be left alone with Daryl out of fear that she would make another allegation against her. Sheila hadn't told her daughter that she planned to put her in a group home and that Daryl wouldn't live with her family. She found out only once she had landed, and she was furious with her mother's decision. She took her to the TWCA shelter located in Sarasota and promised that she would visit her as soon as possible. They would pick her up for church on the weekends, but that was pretty much it up until her mother's death. The Bellushes settled into their rental home. It was too small and cramped for their big family, but they'd have to deal with it while their larger house was being built. They had 7 people living in a 3-bedroom home, and they didn't have room for Daryl. Additionally, they went to great lengths to ensure that Allen would never be able to find them. They got a post office box, an unlisted number, and Sheila kept to herself for the most part. They believed that they had escaped Allen, but the truth is, he was only ever one step behind any move that Sheila made. That's all I got for you for part 2. Be sure to join me in part 3, where we'll be discussing the lengths that Allen went through to ensure Sheila got the punishment that he felt she deserved. Thank you for watching, and as always, remember the name Kasey Shane. I'm out.